Welcome to another episode of Not Another Boring Insurance, a podcast with your hosts, my good self, Mr. Brendan Gale, and Matthew Pugliese.
Hello, mate. Good to be back for another exciting episode.
It is an exciting one today. We've got Mr. Paul Muir, which I'm excited to talk about. He has done everything when it comes to compliance, but most recently and probably well known being the Managing Director of Compliance Advocacy Solutions. So excited to have a bit of a chat with him about his career, his business as well, and then do a bit of a deep dive into expert reports as well, which is part of the Code of Practice review.
Looking forward to this one. Paul's one of the best blokes going around the industry, so I'm sure he's going to share quite a bit with us today. Very interesting individual. So looking forward to this one indeed.
Agreed. Looking forward to it. Let's get stuck in.
All right. Today, we have the Managing Director of Compliance Advocacy Solutions, bringing over 40 years of experience in compliance, risk and insurance, and an AFCA industry panel member, and was one of the 3 independent panel members selected for the review of the 2020 General Insurance Code of Practice. Now, this individual has told me before not to introduce him as Australia's leading insurance compliance expert, so I'll take that feedback on. So allow me to welcome to the podcast, in my opinion, Australia's leading insurance compliance expert, Mr. Paul Muir. Paul, how are you, mate? How have you been?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for that kind introduction as well, Brendan and Matt. I'm actually delighted to be able to join you. And I probably should say, yes, I am an AFCA panel member, but any comments are my own personal comments and the comments of the company, not AFCA at all. I'm not allowed to speak on behalf of AFCA, of course, but absolutely looking forward to the next short time that we have with each other.
Absolutely. We've got a lot to talk to. And I see you've been very busy as well. I was stay pretty close to LinkedIn. And yeah, I can't tell if your LinkedIn is your Compliance Advocacy Solutions or a travel blog at the moment.
Yeah, I did. I was up at the Underwriting Agencies Council Market Exchange in Brisbane last week. I love the Market Exchange. I do a lot of work with the Underwriting Agencies Council, especially with the new class of 26. I'm doing the compliance module actually in August. But unfortunately, I got hit with the bug that seems to be going around. So coming home in the plane, it was an experience. I'll say that.
Wasn't the best trip.
Not kind of go into the details other than that the cabin crew were fantastic. But I was pretty happy to get home, I must admit. So, but yeah, I am flying around a bit. Of my next one, I'm going down to Adelaide as well for the Underwriting Agency Council Market Exchange down in Adelaide, 12th of August, I think it is. And we've also been on it again for the second year in a row to be named as a finalist in the ANZIF Awards for the category of service provider to the insurance industry. So my wife and I will be putting on the tux. Well, I'll be putting on the tux and heading off to the ANZIF Awards. I think that's about the 13th of August. So it's certainly going to be a pretty fun August coming up.
Congratulations.
Well.
That's a great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Great nomination.
It's
absolutely. Congratulations. Who's going to beat you in that? Surely you're a shoe-in.
We're a very small company, so it's but yeah, look, I see it as a badge of honor just being recognized to the extent because it is the elite industry awards. They've got pretty strict judging criteria, got a great judging panel, and just being nominated as a finalist it's nice, but basically running my business now, just my son and I, for the last 9 years, it's nice to get some form of public recognition. Having said, there's a lot of people. I've got a marketing company who I use. I've got another company I use who kind of helps me to keep things in order. So, even though the company is just myself and my son, there's a kind of a wider network of people, and of course all my awesome clients as well. It's all one big happy extended family. as far as general insurance. So
For sure. No, they're very, very well deserved. Very well deserved indeed.
thank you.
So, to kick things off, Paul, it'd be great to go back in time a little bit, hear about your upbringing and the path that took you into the world of insurance.
Yeah, like anyone, you kind of fall into it, and then once you get bit by the insurance bug, it becomes a real passion. Um, I actually started in the banking industry. Again, I work was the last thing as a mere 18-year-old. Work was the last thing. Was more almost work to kind of fund all the partying and stuff. Um, but I did fortunately end up in the insurance department of the bank, and that's where I got my first taste of insurance. I loved it. I did casualty insurance, and that's where my passion for the law first started as well. And funny enough, back then, back in 1980, whatever, I kind of for insurance qualifications or law qualifications. I thought I'm working for an insurer, so I went down the NSIF route. Um, an opportunity came up with Royal Sun Alliance, and I got my fellowship with ANZIF, started with the various companies that made up, actually back then it was just the Sun Alliance, and become Royal Sun Alliance, went through various iterations, ending up at Suncorp. I did revisit and go back at the age of 42 as a mature age student and got my law qualifications. 6 year part time while having a executive role at Suncorp was interesting. Included a a um, a trip to China because I decided to do Chinese tour, but that's a whole different story as to why my mate allowed me to talk. I allowed myself to be talked into doing Chinese law because it's a pretty quick course. But that was one of the more interesting things. And honestly, I actually thought I would be at Suncorp for a while. My love for the law and risk and compliance started to overtake my passion for underwriting. So around 2000, I moved into the world of risk compliance back then, always in that second line role at Suncorp. And actually, I thought I would retire at Suncorp. Again, and part of my advice to anyone is, don't close your options out. Always be open minded to any opportunity that may pass, even if it doesn't look like an opportunity. And Suncorp were wonderful to me. They're going through another big organizational change. And they asked me what would I like to do, to be honest. And yeah, there was a lot going on in the compliance. The Hayne Royal Commission was just around the corner. I was feeling a bit jaded, a bit tired. I thought it's maybe time for me to move on. Um, yeah, and that took a lot of because Suncorp were wonderful, and from that, then I launched my own business. And 9 years have gone past, and it's just kind of it's nice to think that um, the thing that you're passionate about, people see value in that and are happy to pay for that value as well. So it's been a wonderful experience. I try to give back a bit. That's why I've got roles. Help the ICA roles at AFCA and stuff. Some of the other services I do with individuals in the industry. The insurance industry has been wonderful to me and my family. So this is part. When I set the business up, I kind of said probably 20-25% of what I do I want to be able to give back to the industry. So, and I still hold that model now. So, hence why I'm involved with a few industry things as well.
Yeah, amazing. Do you remember what those initial things were that made you fall in love with insurance? Or maybe that's too emotional that
You know,
that initially drew you to insurance back then?
um, I could kind of say how I was helping other people, but it kind of wasn't. It was, I think it was the passion. I came from a technical background. It was only over probably the second half of my career, I realized how important relationships with people were. So I was kind of going down that technical pathway. and I was fascinated with the technical aspects of insurance, um, the kind of the kind of the idea of the Lloyd's Coffee House, and I was absolutely fascinated by that technical of how insurance and reinsurance operated, and utmost good faith, and all the technical stuff. It really got me involved, and it allowed me to kind of think. And then as I became an executive manager at Suncorp, became aware that, CEOs and boards and heads of don't really care about the technical stuff. They kind of just accept that of you as that's just what you know. But how can we apply that to kind of help the company and come up with how we resolve issues and problems? And then that's kind of where, I really got the passion, but the passion certainly first started from that technical perspective and case law. I loved reading cases. So, yeah, I was bitten by the technical bug. Funny enough, it's been since my running my, since I was at one stage at Suncorp, I was the executive manager for compliance across the general insurance and life insurance, and that's when I started to understand the true impact of insurance on customers,
Mm.
how it impacts their life if we make an error from a claim, for example, especially customers who are experiencing vulnerability as well. That then I really became aware of just how important we are of helping out a customer who may have had an unfortunate event, which has completely disrupted their life, and how much insurance can come in to help out. So, it's kind of been it started with the technical bit, and then it got the customer piece. And now fortunately in my certainly probably in the last 10 to 15 years at Suncorp and then running my own company, I've been able to join up all of the elements as well.
Yeah. The technical piece is interesting, isn't it? Because it's there's still so much that is up for interpretation. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
it's heavily regulated, there's codes, um, there's all sorts of guidelines around what you can and can't do, but you still find yourself, particularly in complex claims, where there needs to be a judgment call. There
It
needs to be
does.
a
It
level of
does. Yeah.
interpretation around it too, so it can be really fascinating.
I think the interesting play, and you're right, on the spectrum as we go from consumers to mid-market commercial to corporates, the um, the overlay of fairness comes in. Certainly at that consumer end, I think fairness over technical, and then as you go to the spectrum, the higher end of the spectrum, where the actual powers of the parties involved are a bit more equal, you can bring in more of a technical stuff. But I do get a bit annoyed when it's a kind of a consumer claim and someone starts talking about the Wayne Tank case, when it should be fairness that dictates. If you've got an excluded event that runs concurrently with an included event for a homeowner, it just seems wrong to me to rely upon the Wayne Tank case to say you got no cover whatsoever,
Mm.
when the law and the code is embedded as far as fairness. And to me, fairness would be you should fall on the side of the insured in those circumstances. So I kind of noticed now in my 40-year career that that fairness to consumers has come in and into place, I suppose, with all the technical elements as well. And it seems me because fairness can be such a uh, subjective view. I think that's the one issue that the industry really hasn't got its hands around yet. What does fairness actually mean? Um, and I know we've talked about this before. For me, it's not necessarily the outcome, but ensuring that the actual process itself is fair. Um, the insured gets a fair chance to put forward their views. Experts' reports, which I know we're going to talk about, are independent and fair. So I think we can start to introduce fairness into the insurance ecosystem. Um, and there's obviously still a role to play within the technical, because at the end of the day, as claims people often tell me, we just simply can't pay out anything. I certainly acknowledge that. But I think, given that if fairness is enshrined within the Corporations Act, it's enshrined within the code, Therefore, if you say I'm a technical person, it means that you must have elements of fairness in there because the law and code does require fairness. So I kind of have a bit of a smile when a senior claims person wants to have a bit of a talk to me about the technical, and they say I'm a very technical person. Well, then in that case, then you must have fairness because one of the major general obligations of a licensee is to provide your financial services efficiently, honestly, and fairly. So therefore, if you're applying a technical lens to the claim, then it has to be efficient, honest, and fair as well. So it's quite an interesting conversation. But I think that whole element of fairness is probably the one thing that the industry is still coming to terms with, and I think that's where the ICA is trying to take the new code as well.
The other one I've heard described as is the pub test, which is a very Aussie way to kind of put it as well. Does it pass the pub test?
Yeah, I prefer my mum's test. Does it pass Paul's mum's test? Yeah,
Yeah, that's another one.
yeah. But I do think that that kind of, I certainly do think that kind of overarching of fairness is now, especially with the consumer type claims. I think that's where fairness kind of needs to be explored, and what does it actually mean? Fairness in claims and fairness in sales.
Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense. Now, you briefly moved across your career, which is quite extensive, as we talked about in the intro. It'd be really cool to hear from you. What are some of those key milestones or successes? Some of those moments that you look back on fondly.
Yeah, look, there's a couple. One was the tort reform around the 1990s, late 1990s in New South Wales. You may remember back to the Bob Carr days when the costs of liability, public liability insurance was escalating, and the government and industry, they're having to cancel carnivals and fates and um, all the fun stuff. It was just too hazardous. And then the various states introduced tort reform. And I remember an ICA got me as an industry expert. I was a bit naive back then, and they got a bunch of business owners in a kind of a hall, a kind of a town hall type showcase, and they got me along as the industry expert. And I was very excited. And then I got into the room, and 200 pairs of eyes of pure hatred. Um,
No.
and only now that I own my own company, I realize now why they were so annoyed at me, because I was put up as well, here's an insurer. Funny enough, the way I got out of it, and even though they may not have agreed, they now understood,
Mm.
is I went back to my technical roots, and I explained it in a technical way, but in a way that people could understand, that the more claims you get, the cost of insurance goes up, et cetera, et cetera. And given that they ran their own companies, they understood that. Um, but it was here's me bowing it with a big smile on my face to see arms folded and not a lot of happy people. But having said that, I think, the fact that, I was seen as an industry expert back then, and that was quite a highlight. Certainly things like, being an APCA panel member, I've always, looked up and respected the role that APCA plays. Emma Curtis, who I knew, when I was at Suncorp, Emma was at ASIC, so being able to work with Emma as part of the AFCA has been fantastic. The Funny enough, one of the things we introduced licenses. So this was before the merger with Suncorp. So basically, each portfolio had to have a license to operate. It was not an AFSL license, but it was kind of the forerunner to the design and distribution obligations that we see now, where the portfolio had to be subjected to actuarial review. There had to be delegated underwriting authorities there. Um, we rolled that out. I rolled that out across across Piro at the time, and APRA picked that up and used that as part of their one of their APRA guidances around insurance risk as well. So that was pretty cool. As I said, being a member of AFCA has been an absolutely highlight. The code review work I did with Helen Rao as the chairperson, that was just an unbelievable experience. And going down to Canberra and speaking to the chair of the Parliamentary Flood Inquiry, like just, I kind of like was a kind of a small kid in a candy shop. Here's me walking around the back hallway of Parliament House. And, wow, how's this? I think at one stage Helen said, "Hey, focus, will you?" Because I'm just, well, it was pretty cool. So it's nice to have a 40-year where some of the stuff that you kind of get invited to. It's quite cool. And then obviously being able to start my own company and just how successful that's been. I always, I don't ever take that for granted. Every single client, I've just got another potential client within the last half an hour. It's just quite humbling that they'll come to someone such as myself and they ask me to kind of get an AFSL for them or whatever. It's quite a humbling experience. Each single client engagement for me is a highlight as well. So there's some of the obviously things like getting my qualifications. 6 years part time. Again, my huge thank you to my wife Carolyn and my son and my daughter, because I think I was a bit of a pain during those 6 years. They would probably say more of a pain than I normally am. But again, when we went down to Victoria to kind of, and I had my coat and my hat on and stuff, that 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 was a pretty cool moment. Being a fellow of ANSIF, that was pretty cool because again, yes, they're pieces of paper, but it kind of represents the amount of work that you put into these things as well. Um, so yeah, like, there's quite a lot of highlight and obviously all the people I've met along the way, it's still very much it is absolutely still a people industry. And indeed, when I first started my own company, it was because the people that I actually had known over the years and that had moved on to other organizations. In the early days, it was those connections I had with people that enabled me to get appointed to some of the jobs that I actually have done as well. So, yeah, it's very much still a people industry. And so a huge number of highlights, but they're just, one or two that kind of I do think about now as we kind of get on in our years. I'm starting to become one of those um, people as you get on behind you. Oh, in my day, and I kind of vow I don't want to say that in my day, but I seem to be saying it a bit more and more these days. So
Well, what you said earlier was a good segue into my next line of questioning, actually, which is it's a two-part question.
yeah, I'm not very
First
good
one
at
was
two parts.
around the old two-parter.
I
So
always
the first,
forget what the first part was.
yeah, maybe I'll split them up then.
No,
First one
you're
is
right. You're
around
right. You're
so
right.
the commencement of compliance advocacy solutions. So I'm interested to hear from you what that experience was like because one of the things that Matt and I talk about when we're talking to business owners is that leap into starting their own business and how nerve wracking that
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
be. Lots of lost sleep,
Yep.
uh, imposter syndrome can sneak in.
Oh, yeah. They're all there. They're all there. Yeah.
How was that for you? What was that experience like saying, "You know what? I'm gonna give this a run on my own?"
Yeah. Look. The first big thing I want to make. I had a very comfortable financial cushion safety net. Um, being an executive for Suncorp for a long period of time, plus with the payment that I received. So for me, the actual risk, and I never compare myself to other startup companies because I did not have that financial risk there. If it didn't work out for me, then I would go back to corporate life. In talking to my wife, we thought give it a 2-year go, and we've kind of never had the conversation since then. Um,
Wow.
Having said that, notwithstanding that common sense and logic tells you that even if it doesn't work out, um, the fact is, and it's your own sense of worth. So me as a individual, it's, you know, what forces me to go and motivates me to go is, the actual value, that I see in myself in being able to provide compliance services, etc. So, rightly or wrongly, we hold ourselves up to this benchmark of expectations for ourselves, including a bit of imposter, and that's the toughest struggle. I can only imagine that on top of that, you had all your other financial issues to worry about. But that of itself, you know, I need to prove me to myself, when how many times do you have to continually prove to yourself how actually good you are? And it's one person actually said to me, Paul, I actually don't think that you actually recognize the true value that you offer to others, because at the end of the day, and I'm not allowed to say this, but to my clients, I find compliance easy, and and there is a risk, therefore you can almost undervalue that, because
Mm,
you think it's so easy. Why doesn't everyone else see it? But the thing, and this is why, I will always owe a debt to Hollard, because when COVID hit and the shutdowns happened, I was about to sign off on a pretty big contract with Hollard across its personal insurance and commercial insurance. Um, and then, like everyone else in industry, then they cut down all their external supply contracts. But to support me, they still allocated a certain number of hours. Um, and funny enough, COVID, I must admit, like anyone, I could have, like, I kind of, oh God, that's the end of my company and whatever. And I thought, well, I kind of set the business up to give back to the industry. And that's where all the online webinars started. So I started, one, to keep myself occupied. I started doing almost fortnightly a webinar on a topic, and all of a sudden 50, 100, 200 people started attending. And I thought, okay, and that kept me involved, and it gave everyone a sense of community and stuff. Um, and it kind of helped you get out of bed each day, not what we're seeing, what was happening around the world. So when I look back, I'm pretty proud of the company and myself of how we got through that COVID period. And funny enough, a lot of the stuff that I was doing for COVID has really helped my business going forward. Both the online, the fact that, doing webinars and things is a matter of, so now I've got a whole membership subscription. I've got a great external marketing company. But I've now been able to build an offering for individual people. So I've got offerings for corporate clients, but there's a lot of stuff we do at a very discounted rate, because that's part of my giving back to the industry. All that stuff of doing webinars and finding out, that came from COVID. That's the other thing, is I had no idea to how to set up a company. I made mistakes like everyone else. Um, at the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff and there's a lot of people who want to help you. Um, and it's not as daunting. As long as you're open minded and you're happy to give it a go, it's not as daunting as you think. So it's a well worn pathway. It's just that you've never been down that pathway before. So that's where the experience of
mm,
others starts to benefit you, because they take you by the hand. That's the other big thing. During when I set my company up, even now, the number of people who want to help you is amazing. We've got a wonderful industry. Even as evidence at my illness episode at the underwriting exchange, like the number of text messages I got and the concern that people showed. So that kind of people, that kind of really helped my company. Even now, when I do my LinkedIn posts, I got something like 22,000 people follow me. It feels like I've got a fan base online who just wants to see me do well. And that's such a powerful thing for me. Kind of keeps you going, like anyone, we have our good days and our down days, and I don't feel like doing this, but kind of knowing that there's a kind of a fan base out there who just wants to see you do well and wants to hear about your journey and wants to hear about your accomplishments. I've been lucky. I've not experienced tall poppy syndrome. Maybe I'm not a tall poppy, after all. But I just find people are wonderful. They just want to help you. So, my advice to anyone else starting the business that, approach it, have a plan in place, reach out to others. In the early days, I was a bit nervous to share information because I thought that was my value. It's not, So actually, so now being able to share information freely to everybody, I do that all the time.
Mm.
So that's. I'm not too sure I've actually answered. The question you asked, but certainly that the kind of a journey the company has been on. It's in in the main, it's been a wonderful experience. The time when it gets a bit tough, that's when you need the support of people, your family, and then others. Everyone is always willing to help, always willing to have a chat about stuff. So it is a wonderful insurance community that we've got.
Yeah, amazing. No, you definitely answered the question. And I think that's a big kudos to you as well. Like a lot of people struggled through COVID and didn't change anything. And so they continued to struggle or worse. Obviously, you're talking there about changing, moving online, which has then actually amplified the business moving forward as well. So thinking differently and the huge supporter base that you talk about. As I said, I'm on LinkedIn pretty frequently and you can see it. And that's, again, that's a testament to you and how you conduct yourself. People just want to work with you, Paul. It just is what it is. And that's a big
Yeah.
credit to you and how you've run your business.
Thank you so much for that. One of the things I said when I first started, I put in some guardrails for myself as to how I wanted to use LinkedIn, how I wanted to portray myself. And the golden rule is be kind. I never make adverse comments about anyone, how people want to conduct themselves on social media. That's up to them. And I never make comments. Even to the extent if ASIC takes an insurer to federal court, I won't name the insurer in my post because that's not my purpose is to educate and learn, not to name and shame. So that has stood by me well, and I don't get any negative comments about my posts whatsoever. So I think that just having things like in place of just being kind and don't let yourself get caught into the trap of making the easy comment. I've had a couple where I've had to take the post down. I some of the industry bodies that we have, I do respect a lot, and it's only happened once or twice. But if one of them calls me up and has a chat to me about a post, they would never say you got to take it down, but I think they kind of, and that's kind of me not understanding how much I can influence, to be honest. But I will take it down without hesitation because again, it's there to inform, to educate, to learn. Obviously, I've got a business that I want to sell and promote, but I kind of make sure I intermingle that with the education and learning piece. So, you know, I I think having those rules in place for yourself as well, and not when you're trying to, business is business is down a bit or whatever at the moment. Therefore, I'll bend my rules. No, that's where your core discipline's got to come in, and say, no, no, I don't want to play that game. I want to be honest, ethical. I want to be kind. I want to be generous. And that's for the last 9 years. That's pretty. It's kind of helped me, kind of where I am now.
Yeah, it's good ground rules. And as your audience base grows, particularly the size of yours, I imagine that task becomes more and more difficult because there's a higher probability of saying something inadvertently that somebody takes the wrong way.
Well, actually, the issue is once you start to snowball, you can't stop. If I don't post 2 or 3 times a week, people start ringing up and asking me if everything's okay. So, my
Well, fair
my
check.
I get up at 5:15 each morning, go for a lovely walk up to my local coffee shop, and invariably, that's when the idea pops into my head about that morning's post, LinkedIn post. Um, and now I've got a thing underneath my desk. I've got a standing desk. I've got this, t t t um treadmill. So now when I do
Ah,
my post, I'm actually walking along on the treadmill. Um, but there's certainly enough content within the industry. But yeah, it's funny once you kind of because everyone says, "Oh, Paul, I think I've known you from the LinkedIn. I follow you, whatever." So you build up an expectation, and you have to keep meeting that expectation. That's the other thing.
True.
Once you start doing stuff, you know, it's no longer really your, subject to health and other matters, but it's no really longer your choice. It's more of an obligation now. So, I kind of say I really can't stop doing my LinkedIn posts because people get so much value and the feedback I get, and they are kind of enjoyable. I do have to be a bit careful that I don't make them too controversial. So I don't try and be controversial. I just try and present the facts and then have a view around the facts without trying to be too controversial. Though, yeah, so yeah, it's been good fun.
No, doing it well, doing it well. The second part to my question was sort of along the journey of starting the business. I know now that you've got a couple of differing service offerings. So it'd be interesting to hear kind of what you're currently working on, the service
Yeah.
offerings that you have, etc.
Yeah, thank you for that. So basically, when I started my company, it was around the life cycle of pretty much an underwriting agency. Um, so it's doing the AFSL work. So I do a lot of work to get licenses. So both getting new licenses and variations to existing license, adding response managers. I'm very fortunate. I've got quite a lot of overseas-based clients who are looking to start up a financial services in this country. A lot of insurance brokers who are authorised reps and looking to get their AFSL. So, that's probably all these services are probably about 20% of my total business. Um, the setting up their risk and compliance frameworks and doing documentation and annuals, that's another key feature. Compliance health checks, compliance reviews. I don't do file by file audits. I come down from a top down perspective on the basis of if the engine's working well, then normally the output looks after itself, so they're quite well received. Education and training's a large bit of what I do. There's the corporate where I do it for companies like AFSL training or responsible manager, and then there's some of the individual stuff I do where people sign up for um, monthly memberships and whatnot. There's the advice piece. I get a lot of people ask me. I always have to tell them I can only give you compliance advice. I'm not allowed to give you any legal advice, but that compliance service is quite well. The other new offering is an idea that came up to me, which we're launching 1st of September. I kind of had a bit of a love-hate relationship with AI. Other than, as you may have alluded to before, if you ask AI who's Australia's leading compliance specialist, maybe, but I think that was AI's way to say, Paul, I'm not that bad. Um, I've started using AI, Habeas, it's called. It helps research case law and acts of parliament. And I treat it like another textbook. And again, like anything, it's on how good your question is
Mm.
the response you get. So there's still quite a degree of expertise required to position the question so I point it to where I want it to go. And then I got thinking again in one of my early morning talks that if I struggle to understand AI, how are people who are trying to put AI in place for their business to make sure that they're still compliant, how are they going? So I've been exploring a role where I come from it from a compliance perspective. So the client's use and choice of AI and the vendor is entirely up to them. I work with them to make sure that whatever AI they embed, they're still meeting their compliance obligations. So we're working through that. It's going to kind of be a soft launch, soft, hardish launch around 1st of September. I've got the team kind of working through that. So they'll be kind of and it makes sense that more and more companies are using AI. So this kind of service kind of aligned with that. Having said that, I'm a member of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and they've got a sprint course with Sydney University for AI for directors of companies, and I've signed myself up to that as well. So I thought, I want to know, because one of the things I say to clients is you need to know the risks of AI to be able to manage those risks. So I need, when I work with clients, we need to understand what the AI is doing, how's it doing, and what's the expected output. So then we can overlay, because the thing that's constant are your compliance obligations. AFSL code, they're all constant. So the thing that's changing is the use of AI, but you still have to be compliant and you still have to do so. I think it'll be fun anyway, but hopefully some clients will see some value. So that's the next big thing that we'll kind of soft launch around about the 1st of September.
Yeah, timely. There's definitely some well-publicized examples of AI going very, very wrong. So
Yeah.
there is a definite need for compliance, I'd argue, around it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Um, a question. So with your broad oversight of the industry, where would you say is the biggest opportunity for compliance at the moment?
It's a good question. I think two responses to move, and they're kind of closely related, to move the perception of compliance from rules and guidelines and handbrake and obstacles to a position of it's there to protect us. So I agree with everyone, compliance has gone too far. The problem is because all laws and code, it's like a it started out as an individual piece of string. It's now become so entangled. If you try to untravel anything, you'll get unintended consequences.
Mm.
So it kind of is what it is. It's gone a bit too far in some cases. Some of the stuff that we do may not be offering any value, but is what it is. But turning it around from it's not there for rules and guidelines to slow you down. It's there to protect. And then when you think about how you're going to implement compliance, that it's there to protect, I think it's a much better way of thinking of it. That then brings in the fairness thing. And I don't think we've truly embedded fairness within our ecosystem. So and as I said, as an obligation, fairness is no different to any other legal obligation. It's no different to given an FSG, except fairness is the overarching obligation. So you've got an obligation, if you're a licensee, to be efficient, honest, and fair. Under the code, in all dealings with customers, under paragraph 21, you must be honest, efficient, fair, timely, and transparent in all dealings. So the fairness word keeps popping up, yet we haven't nailed that. We kind of, when we build compliance frameworks, we kind of look at all the easy black and white stuff and kind of ignore which can be easily measured and kind of ignore the fuzzy fairness stuff. Yet fairness is a legal obligation. So I think that's where I think it's both a challenge as well as an opportunity for the industry. And then the overlay of AI, I see AI as a huge benefit to the industry as long as we have ethical and integrity guardrails in place. And that would be my only cautions there of that the ethics and the fairness side keeps pace with the use of AI in the industry. So I think kind of when you have customer facing stuff, that's when you want you to add some guardrails in place. So I think that'll be interesting just watching that space over the next few years as well.
Yeah, good insights. Good insights. So let's move on to expert reports.
Yep.
So I know we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier that you're kind of the initial panel of three that were independently reviewing the code of practice, and in the current draft, there's some changes in around expert reports. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that and kind of the importance of expert reports in
Yeah.
working through a claim?
Yeah. Look, I'll be, I think this will probably be the most controversial I'll be, but at the end of the day, words in the code are kind of pointless unless that's what happens in real life. So it's good having standards in there. It's great saying experts have to be open minded. If you're doing an investigation, you got to be open minded. All wonderful stuff. And I can see experts are changing. Um, but I think it's kind of saying it's almost like it doesn't matter. Yeah, obviously you have to be paid for your services, but unlike anything else, it's almost like being a king's counsel. The party engages you and they pay for your services, but your ultimate duty is to the court. So I would position experts report as it doesn't matter who pays you, your duty is so that anyone who's going to make a determination, whether it be the claims manager, whether it be the insured, whether it be AFCA or court, can use your report knowing that this is a true independent report. So the report becomes the property of everybody and not biased towards the
Oh,
person who paid you for the services. So that's kind of my opening. If you're happy, I've got about 5 points I kind of like to cover.
Yeah,
But
go for it.
but that independence for me, to have fairness embedded within the ecosystem is critical. So we need to have experts reports. So it's not a case of, I'm not talking about the matters to go to court. They are they are corporates against insurers, both with, you know, huge firms on each party side. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about your mums and dads where something's happened to their home or their car and we get an expert's reports in. So that's the context I'm talking, which is what the code's aimed at. You know, given that pretty much the code's taking out a lot of companies out of the code now. So I think that independence, it doesn't matter who pays you. Instead of getting two reports, we just get one report, and everyone can rely upon that report as the basis of truth and fact. As I said, fairness. I think the builders, experts have got a real big play to play as far as fairness in the ecosystem. Because your first external report can send you off on a pathway that's pretty hard to recover by. And we're seeing that with cash settlement at the moment. So as soon as a builder's report, for example, said there's an element of wear and tear, maybe at the back of the house, and the storm was at the front of the house, then all of a sudden the poor claims officer says, "Oh, we can't guarantee the repairs, have a cash settlement," which has got its own inherent suite of issues as well. So, and it's very hard to come back on that pathway. So, the experts' reports from a causation is critical of setting the claim down the correct pathway. Um, which just if I can quickly go back to I think having AI triage claims and complaints to pick up that this has got the characteristics of a complex claim or complaint, it will immediately go to the person with the right skill set and knowledge to how to handle it. At the moment, it's only when a claim starts falling off the rails that the right form of expertise gets involved. You've already caused harm to the customer. So I think there's some good use for AI there. Causation. The expert's report has to say what caused it based upon their expertise. Um, and for instance, if there was the water entry was in the far right north corner of the house, yet the water damage is in the back southeast, explain to me in plain English, how did the water get from there to there? So that's kind of the two part. One is causation, and the second part is explain in plain English so that a customer can pick it up and say, "I get it." I talked about I talked about procedural fairness. You may not be happy if the claim's not going to get paid, but as long as you can understand why, most reasonable people would say, "Yeah, okay, I accept that." Rather than getting a report which they don't understand, next thing they're off to AFCA, and 3 years of their life are gone because their whole focus is on this. So, and then, as I said, plain English, and don't have a view on policy. You're not an expert in insurance, you're an expert in your particular field. So, don't say in your reports, this seems to be a covered event. It raises false expectations. Or worse, don't say it's not covered, not your decision. So, just kind of to wrap up, independence that everyone can rely upon the report. Um, it's it's embedded in fairness, so the experts has approached it from an open-minded, doesn't care. Their job is just to work out what caused that loss. It covers off causation. It does. They don't have a view on whether it's covered or not. They don't care. They should not care. And it's written in plain English so that everyone can follow it. Then I think if we can kind of get those five elements, then I think we're going down a pretty good pathway.
Yeah, they're important. I know I've seen over my years some failures on those fronts. Probably a big one as well that I've seen is with all good intentions, sometimes experts will wander out of their lane. a little bit. So they'll
Yes.
comment on something which they don't necessarily have the qualifications for, and then that can set the claim off on the wrong
Yeah.
path.
I think, that's got a lot to do with the scope and the instructions, and and I feel sorry for claims officers where they're trying to deal with the volumes, where and the use of template forms are good and bad, because trying to deal with the volumes and get this one off your desk and get an assessor out there, you're kind of ticking this template without really, if the customer's told you something, you want to be very clear in your instructions to the expert saying, I want you to do this for me, bang, 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 and nothing else. So I think there's a lot, I agree with you. There's a lot we can fix up there around what are the instructions and stay within your lanes. It's almost saying, here's my expertise. Yes, I'm qualified to talk about this, and have the confidence to say, "I'm not qualified to talk about this," and you'll need to get a a
Mm,
a a p a a plumber or a mold expert rather than give a view of, "Oh, there seems to be mold here." Well, what are you, an expert? Or that I could not see any evidence of mold. Well, it's not gonna jump up and say hi to you. So again, just don't make any comment. It's a better comment saying, in order to detect for the presence of mold, we need to get an expert. Bang, 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 bang. Um, and I think this comes back to an expert trying to think, oh, I have to do this. I've got to stay on the panel. I think the code, it's too it's still wedded. The new code is still very much wedded to repairers and service suppliers who are on insurers' panels. I like to have the insurers to have a bit more accountability for anybody investigating, but I don't know
yeah.
whether the code will be expanded or not to do that. But I think I think that whole panel bit, it doesn't lead to this true independence. So, and I don't have an answer for that. It is the model. It's almost the actual model we've got where you fight tooth and nail to get onto the panel. Therefore you get volume. Doesn't really help trying to drive a true independence. So I think there's a bit of work to be done there as well.
Mm. The other bit that I did like about that when I was reading it, and I guess the context for this observation was, in my experience, generally speaking, these are when you're getting experts in, it's usually quite a disruptive claim for the customer. It's not a lost iPhone. It's going to be something pretty significant. And used water claims as an example, they're probably the biggest ones
Yeah.
that I've seen, particularly when it comes to mold and causation, etc. So I did like the reduction in time frame as well. So recommending to bring it into 60 days as a maximum, but also kind of bookending that with putting the onus on the insurers to be performance managing those experts as well. If they're missing that 60 days, there needs to be some sort of framework in place for that to be performance managed, because it is so disruptive to customers, these claims.
It is, just on I think there's a wider issue on the framework, generally around timeframes where an arbitrary figure in the code doesn't mean that you're always meeting customer expectations. Um, and therefore being able to explain and very clear upfront saying, we're getting this expert in place to do this job, with the time it takes for them to get on site, time for them to do their report, time for us to consider the report and come back to you. We'll be coming back to you within 2 months. Now, the customer may not like that, but now they can build their life around 2 months. Okay, we're not going to hear anything for 2 months rather than, oh, what's going to happen today? What's going to happen today? So the fact that we got timeframes, but I don't think we manage timeframes that well either. But I agree with you. Some of the timeframes in the code, the fact that, if you haven't made a claim decision for motor or home within 12 months, it's automatically covered. Still seems a bit long to me, but it again, there's a lot of stuff there that's really good in the new code, which is certainly taking us down a better pathway.
Mm. Yeah, awesome. Um, Now, before I jump into the last two questions, Matt, was there anything more that you had to ask or probe on any of that?
No, I think you've really sort of touched on it from an insurer's perspective, BG. It's that best practice around providing clear instructions to start with, the scope required, the expert providing factual information that's easy to understand, causations in there, and they're only commenting on what their expertise or their field of expertise are. Just that in
Mm,
itself is super insightful. I
Good.
think of the teams that we used to work. Oh, sorry, Paul, you were going to add one more. I
And
missed one,
Matt,
have I?
sorry to interrupt, Matt, but you just tipped my brain around scope of works as well. The scope of
Mm,
work should not be a bargaining exercise between the insurer and the insured. Too often I see a report and then there's a scope of work and there's a quote and the three don't line up. It just doesn't make sense. Again, being independent, if you're going to do a scope of work, it's got to be a comprehensive scope of work that a client in their own in plain English can go through and say, yep, okay, that tick, 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 yes, I agree with it. For me, scope of works in large, home claims is critical.
yeah.
Um, and too often I see that the scope of works just don't line up with what the report said, or certainly don't line up with the quote said. And yet, because our claims officers have got so much on their work, they're not going through that with a fine tooth comb. Maybe eventually AI can do that. So it's incumbent upon the expert or even the builder or the cost assessor. I know we're going outside of experts a bit to get that scope of work so it's fair and that
Hmm.
becomes a basis of your conversations. It's bad enough where you get a scope of work and next thing there's a cash settlement offer coming in and say, well, hang on, I thought that part of the room was going to get fixed too. Oh yeah, we'll go back to. So I think the scope of work, there's still a fair bit of work to be done around just getting that right from day one and not, it really shouldn't be up to the insured to kind of run the, run the scope through because what the industry is doing, I think claimant intermediaries have got a genuine role to play. Um, and they're there because some insurers are not doing the right things by customers unintentionally. I don't think anyone intentionally wants to do the wrong thing. I think it's due to volumes and inexperience, et cetera, et cetera. So claimant intermediaries have got a genuine role to play to come in and make sure all that stuff's right. So I kind of look forward to a day when you don't need both pays to have their own expert. It just
Mm.
happens that the scope of work is an accurate reflection of what needs to be done. Um,
Yeah, that's a huge one. Yeah, too often you hear stories of claims getting all the way down the track, and then all of a sudden there's a scope dispute.
yeah,
We're talking, we've already got quotes, and yeah,
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
you've missed that key step. So to jump back a little bit, Paul, obviously you've talked through your career, which has been highly successful, and then successful as a business owner as well. Interested to know what's one sort of single best habit that's
Mm.
contributed to your success, something that you think others should be adopting.
Okay. So, well, I kind of come up with two, but I'm going to say them as one because they're connected. But it's just my way of saying two. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say it's what others should adopt because I think it's unique to each individual what drives their own success. And success is measured against their own standards as well. So I don't, you know, I kind of thinking, when we kind of say, oh, that person's a very successful person, pretty much every person's a successful person, for what they've achieved in their life, et cetera, et cetera. Um, some of the things that when I look back to as to what's got me through interesting times, when there's been some challenging complexity. I think the inquiring mind and understanding why and being curious and asking, um, that kind of gets you kind of thinking your stuff closely. I think one of the skill sets I have, and it's like the person who plays golf or a sport well, they may not be the greatest coach because I don't know how I do it. But when I at Suncorp, when I started to had to present to boards and CEOs and heads of, um, I do it really good now. I can join dots pretty simply when it doesn't seem to be any pattern there. So if someone just says a few words to me, my wife said, you can see when you phase out. But my mind's already thinking about the code, thinking about financial service laws, the ASIC Act, putting it all together. What does this mean to come up with a response? I seem to do that pretty well and pretty easily. And I kind of think that's part of the value that I offer to people, that I can pretty much, if you say one or two topics to me, and maybe, and I don't do it from a sales perspective, but at the client engagement stage, I must admit, when a client asks me, "Have you got any idea how this works?" I'm still there. You're tapping on after an hour later. You kind of convince them that you're kind of an expert. So I think those combinations. The other thing, certainly for those people in compliance. So if I had to give one piece of advice to a new compliance person, it's the old baseball umpiring technique I learned, and in law. So I kind of learned this from law and from my experience as a baseball umpire. Pause, read, react, and it's based upon the old flight and fight theory, where you get told certain information as a compliance person, and your emotional half, your emotional being, "Oh, let's go do this," and there's enough people running around chaotic. The ability to pause and let the factual side of your brain come in and digest the information, then read the situation, and then in a very, measured approach, then respond to that. I became, and my wife still can't understand. My wife often says, "Can I see the poor that everyone else gets to see?" Because I don't do pause, read, react well at home whatsoever. Um, but for my clients, when they come to me, and plus at Suncorp, when someone came to me with quite a complex issue, we may have done something, it's going to be a huge customer remediation, it's going to hit the headlines. Being the calm person in the room is critical. So anyone
Mm,
in a compliance, a legal role, a risk role, that ability to be calm, the calm person in the room, um, backed by your technical stuff, but you don't need to keep convincing people that you got technical expertise, because that's your back of mind stuff. It's being that calmness, being that measured approach. So the kind of pause, read, react is a process that now just comes easy to me. Um, and I that would kind of be my number one advice outside of the true number one, be kind, you know. Um, I over my corporate career, I was like anyone else. I climbed the corporate ladder. I thought there was a much better view up there. You kind of get there, and you're thinking, um, yeah, um, so and you do some things which, in hindsight, you wish maybe you hadn't done it, and whatnot. Above all, just be kind. It's a very small industry. It's a large industry. It's a small industry. You can't afford to get anyone offside, and you don't want to. Like, life's too short to go around thinking, "Oh, no, I don't like that person because they did something to me 5 years ago," so it's not worth it. So my overarching on it, it's just be kind, be generous to people, give of your time, share your information with people, um, and then from a kind of compliance risk perspective, adopt that pause, read, react, and be the calm person in the room.
great advice. Really, really good advice. And last question was who you would nominate for us to talk to next? Who would you like to
Ooh,
sit down and listen to a podcast
There's
with?
a lot of people who could easily, and by nominating one is no reflection on anyone I'm not nominating. How'd you like that caveat?
playing
Uh,
favourites.
but there's a person who's recently I've had a few bit to do with, Jamie Smith. I don't know if you know Jamie Smith. So Jamie Smith was ex-Hollard. He's now he's just started as the chief operating officer at one of the Australia's leading insurtech companies, Raindrop, I think it is. Marvelous owner. She is fantastic. Jamie's a great fit there. Jamie's been spending a lot of time in the AI space, but then applying it from a very much a business perspective, trying to solve the business issues, but very deep critical thinking. He's an amazing person. I think he'd be wonderful. He would, if Jamie was on the podcast, he would be something, certainly one that I would, kind of listen to and pay attention to.
Excellent. All
Good
right.
one.
Then we'll be following Jamie up.
No problem at all.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much for coming along. Very, very much appreciated. I
My
know I
pleasure.
obviously touched on it a number of times throughout, but congratulations on all your success. This is a relationship that we value very much. Obviously, we've done some work together in the past, and looking forward to continue working again in the future. So thank you very much for coming
Uh,
along. Very much
Thanks,
appreciate
Paul.
your time.
That was great.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I've had a very, very enjoyable time. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul.
What a great chat, Matt.
Another one. Another great guest, and just an interesting. Was that an hour? I don't even know where the time went on that one. Just flew.
Just disappeared. Just disappeared. I could talk to Paul for ages. What he's seen and his level of insight and
Mm.
knowledge is massive. He is highly, highly valuable to the insurance industry.
All right, and just the variety of topics. A lot of people in the industry know Paul as compliance, so probably started listening or saw the thumbnail thinking it's a pure compliance discussion. But some really good insights from Paul on his relationships across the industry. What's he got? 20,000 followers on LinkedIn. Um,
Huge.
you know, the travel blog that he runs as part of his LinkedIn updates. I love logging onto LinkedIn, seeing where's Paul today, and some of those insights into how he's made it work, particularly through COVID and his sort of concept of being kind and the early morning walks where he does his best thinking. Not to mention the whole expert report piece as well. That really clarified quite a bit for me. It's been some time since I've sort of played in that space. So really interesting. Another one.
Yeah, oh, big time. That expert report stuff, that is something that everybody that
Gold.
is in and around making insurance decisions where
Mm-hmm.
experts are required to support those decisions, they need to listen to this. They need to listen to that and understand it. Because the beauty of Paul is obviously, as he mentioned, he's got the technical background, but being part of that AFCA decision panel, he's seeing what's actually happening. Like he's got
Yeah.
2 feet on the ground when it comes to this stuff. So he knows what can be relied upon and what can't. So everyone should be listening to that.
And it's so simple when you actually think about it, isn't it? That whole got to be independent, used by everybody, simple language, talking about the facts, staying in their lane, all of the sort of points that Paul referenced. It makes sense, and that's what he does best, doesn't he? He takes the complex and really simplifies it for people. So yeah, really insightful one today.
Agreed. Enjoyed that one very much.